I received a text message about the Browns potentially trading for New York Giants defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence. And he was not the only one that said something like that. Josh Taylor, who actually covers the Washington Commanders, in his bio covering the Commanders on Substack and YouTube, an NFL draft analyst, and he previously worked for Bleacher Report and A to Z Sports NFL, has north of 15,000 followers. Tweeting out this morning as well, Sexy Dexy is heading to the AFC North, with eyeball emojis following that. He then followed that up by saying, had two people tell me the Browns are looking to finalize a trade for Lawrence. Now we wait and see. Following up with a number of folks around the league, there's been talks that the Cleveland Browns offer of a second-round pick has been the best offer that the Giants have received, but they are holding out for a first-round pick and would prefer to hold on to Lawrence. And talk about on the Brown side, there are a number of trades, including one on draft day that could involve the Dallas Cowboys.
This is the kind of situation that flips a franchise overnight if one phone call goes through. Because right now, there are real whispers that the Cleveland Browns are trying to pull off a move that would shake the entire league, going after Dexter Lawrence from the New York Giants. And if you think this is just another fake draft week rumor, you might want to slow down for a second, because the smoke around this one is starting to come from multiple directions. Here's the part nobody is talking about. This didn't start as one random tweet. This started with multiple reporters and insiders hinting at the same thing at the same time. You had people covering Cleveland saying they received direct messages about the Browns exploring a trade for Lawrence. Then another voice, completely separate, came out and said the same thing, even doubling down that talks were happening and could be close to something real. That's when it stops being noise and starts becoming a pattern.
That the Browns and the Giants could be coming to a deal on Dexter Lawrence. That's one thing. We'll talk about that. First, I want to go to this. A second-round pick is the best offer that the New York Giants have gotten for Lawrence. If that is true, the Giants would be selling low on Lawrence.
And once you start connecting the dots, it gets interesting fast, because according to what's being said around the league, the Browns have already put an offer on the table. The number floating around, a second-round pick. Now pause right there, because if that's actually the best offer the Giants have received so far, that changes everything about how this situation is being handled internally. This is where it gets dangerous, because if you're the Giants and you accept a second-round pick for a player like Dexter Lawrence, you are not just making a trade. You are admitting you're selling low on one of the most dominant defenders in football. We're talking about a guy who, at his peak, is arguably more impactful than players who have been traded for significantly more. And that's not exaggeration. That's reality when you look at how rare elite defensive tackles actually are.
I think you signed two of these guys, and you turned Dexter Lawrence into Venga Ioane. You had Peter Woods, you had Darrell Jackson, and you had two of these veteran defensive tackles, and then you make a big-time splash at D-tackle in the offseason of 2027. Well, are either of them, any of them as good as Dexter Lawrence? No. But how about a little money ball approach where we're going to try to replenish or replace his production with a lot of bodies and a bunch of different talented.
So now the real question becomes, what are the Giants actually trying to do here? Because their actions are sending mixed signals. On one side, you have reports that they're open to trading him. On the other side, you have clear indications that they are not impressed with the offers coming in. And when you hear that they're holding out for a first-round pick, possibly even more, depending on where that pick lands, that tells you they don't feel pressured to move him at all. Here's the part nobody is talking about. This is not really about football. This is about money. Plain and simple. Dexter Lawrence is looking around the league, seeing where the top defensive tackles are getting paid, and realizing he's not in that elite salary tier. And once that happens, everything else becomes noise. The frustration, the rumors, the "I don't want to be here" narrative. It all circles back to one thing. He wants to get paid like a top-tier player.
All right, so you draft Jeremiah Love in round 1. You're back on the clock at 18 because you trade Dexter Lawrence. You get Venga Ioane, and then you are on the clock at pick number 37.
And honestly, from his perspective, it makes sense. If you believe you're one of the best at your position, why wouldn't you push for that contract? But from the team's perspective, it's a completely different conversation, because now you're dealing with a player who still has 2 years left on his deal and is already pushing for a new one. That's a tough spot for any front office. This is where young players usually make a mistake. They think leverage comes from performance alone, but in the NFL, leverage comes from timing. And right now, the Giants technically still hold the power. They can extend him, they can trade him, or they can do nothing at all. But doing nothing, that's where things start to spiral. Because let's be real, if this situation drags into training camp, it can get ugly fast. You're talking about potential holdouts, distractions in the locker room, and a player who might not be fully bought in. And that's the last thing you want if you're trying to build something stable.
But I was more than happy to walk out of round 2 with Peter Woods as a member of the New York Football Giants. I also think it's a little bit funny that Dexter Lawrence's replacement came from his same exact school.
Now flip it to the Browns side for a second. Why would Cleveland even be interested in making this move? It's simple. They see an opportunity. They have draft capital. They have a roster that could use a dominant presence in the middle. And most importantly, they've shown before that they are not afraid to make aggressive moves if they believe it upgrades their team immediately. Here's the part nobody is talking about. Cleveland doesn't need Dexter Lawrence. They want Dexter Lawrence. And there's a big difference between those two things. When a team is acting out of want instead of need, they are more willing to negotiate, but they are also more willing to walk away if the price gets too high. And that's where this entire situation is heading, because the Giants are basically saying, if you want him, you better come correct. They're not interested in a discount deal. They're not trying to offload him just to avoid drama. They're setting a price that reflects how valuable they believe he is. And if no one meets it, they're perfectly fine keeping him. This is where it gets dangerous, because now you're entering draft week. And draft week is when everything changes. Values shift. Teams panic. And all it takes is one front office deciding they're one player away from competing. And suddenly, that too high asking price doesn't look so crazy anymore. Imagine this scenario. The Browns are sitting there, looking at their board, realizing the player they wanted at 6 isn't there. Or maybe they trade back, pick up extra assets, and now they have flexibility. That's when a deal like this suddenly becomes very real. Because now they can package picks, move things around, and make a serious push. And let's not ignore the Cowboys angle that's floating around either, because if multiple teams get involved, the price goes up, and that's exactly what the Giants want. They don't want one offer, they want a bidding war. They want teams fighting over this asset. That's how you maximize value in the NFL. Here's the part nobody is talking about. The Giants might not actually want to trade Dexter Lawrence at all. This could be a leverage play. This could be them saying, look at the interest around the league. Look at what teams are willing to give up. If you want to stay here, this is what your value is. It's a negotiation tactic as much as it is a trade discussion. And if that's the case, then everything we're seeing right now is part of a bigger strategy. Because at the end of the day, the Giants are a better team with him than without him. That's not even debatable. The only question is whether they're willing to meet his price. Now let's talk reality for a second. What would it actually take to get this deal done? Because a second-round pick isn't enough. Not even close. If you're Cleveland, you're probably looking at something like a late first-round pick plus additional assets. Maybe that 24th pick comes into play. Maybe a second and a third. Something that makes the Giants feel like they're not getting fleeced. But even then, is that enough? That's the real debate. Because when you start comparing this to other trades around the league, especially involving elite defensive linemen, the price tends to climb quickly. And if the Giants truly believe Lawrence is that level of player, they're not going to settle. This is where it gets dangerous, because overvaluing your own player can lead to missed opportunities. If the Giants hold out for a perfect deal that never comes, they could end up stuck in a situation where the relationship deteriorates even further, and then the value drops anyway. So now you're looking at 3 paths: extend him, trade him, or risk letting the situation drag out. And out of those 3, doing nothing might actually be the worst option, because here's the truth. NFL locker rooms are fragile. One unhappy star can shift the entire dynamic. And if that happens, it doesn't just affect one position, it affects the entire team. So now we're at the point where everything is on the table. The Browns are watching, other teams are watching, the Giants are negotiating, and the draft is right around the corner. And this is where I want to leave you with something to think about. If you're running the Giants, what do? Do you pay him and lock in one of the best defensive tackles in football? Do you trade him and try to reset with draft capital? Or do you call his bluff and force him to play out his deal? Because whatever decision they make, it's not just about this season, it's about the direction of the franchise. And trust me, the rest of the league is watching how this plays out.